Hi, welcome. I'm Katie Chambo. I'm an Ayurvedic health counselor, and I'm going to talk to you guys about Ayurvedic medicine. Today we're going to start with an introduction to Ayurvedic medicine, and in the videos that follow, we'll go into some practices that you can start to bring into your life right away. So if you're totally new to Ayurveda or Ayurvedic medicine, it is a beautiful practice of medicine and learning about yourself. It's an over 5,000-year-old tradition rooted in India. Ayurveda literally means knowledge of the self. It's really learning about ourselves, what is best for us individually. It's a really individualized system of medicine that looks at each individual person and the root cause of our diseases and imbalances versus a one-size-fits-all. Ayurveda uses the elements to look at ourselves, to understand ourselves, our medicine, everything within and around us. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, the 5 elements. Everyone is born with a mixture of these elements. We also use the term dosha. So there are 3 doshas in Ayurveda: Vata, Pitta, Kapha. Each dosha is made up of different elements. We've got Vata dosha is air and ether. Pitta is fire, big fire, a little bit of water. Totally burn up if Pitta was just fire. And Kapha is earth and water. And so once you start to learn about your Prakriti, is another word. Prakriti is your original creation, the percentage of those doshas within you at conception. And that's going to stay consistent your whole life, not going to change. So finding out your Prakriti, you'll look at your tendencies, your health history, your physical structure. All of those things are going to help you to find out what percentage of each dosha were you born with, or even each of the elements. Your Vikruti, finding out your Vikruti is another thing that's going to be very helpful. Your Vikruti is your current state. What is your state right now? What elements or what doshas are in excess or out of balance? Is there so much earth or so much air, so much fire? What might that be? What does that even look like? And we'll start to talk about that a little bit more. And no 2 constitutions are exactly the same. No 2 people are exactly the same. And that's why it is an individualized medicine. There's a lot of trial and error that will go into it. Learning about yourself, trying things, seeing what works, what doesn't, making shifts. In saying that, there are some practices that are beneficial for most people, and we're going to go into some of those practices in our future videos. A couple other things for the intro. Another word I'm going to introduce to you is svasta. Svasta is the word for health, the Sanskrit word for health. It literally means being established in the self. So the mind, the soul, the senses are all infused with a sense of self, a sense of wellness, well-being, bliss. And I love that their word for health is established in the self. And they look at self, or Ayurveda looks at self as self with a lowercase s and self with an uppercase s. So the lowercase s being more of our individual sense of self or our ego, and bringing that into balance with a positive self-esteem, as well as self with the bigger S, or our higher self, being connected to something greater than us, spiritual self-awareness. So both of those, the little s and the big S, being established in the self. So the other thing we'll dive into just a little bit more in this intro is our elements. Those are going to be really important to us. So a little bit more about earth. Earth represents stability. Anything that has structure, right, and form is earth. So something like a table is going to have a lot of earth, or a rock is going to have a lot of earth. In our body, it's our physical structure. In our mind, it can represent mental stability, would be a good quality, a good earth quality that we might have. If somebody might have excess earth, that could manifest as obesity, having excess weight, excess tissue, a block in the arteries. If there was excess earth in the mind, that could come out as stubbornness, the inability to budge. Water is a sense of flow. So water will flow in that path of least resistance. In our body, water represents all the fluids in our body. In our mind, water is gentle, loving, compassionate emotions. So if somebody were to have excess water, that might manifest as being overly emotional, or in the physical body, swelling, water retention, in the form of a rash, having a pussy type of rash, or a pussy eczema. That's a good example of eczema. Is a great example of how in Western medicine it may be diagnosed as having eczema, but in Ayurveda, 3 people with eczema are going to have 3 very different treatments depending on which element is coming out. So in the form of a watery pussy rash, that's going to be more of the water element involved, versus, we'll get into fire now. If somebody had a fiery rash, that's going to come out as red and hot, but not pussy, no water, if it's the fire element, and it's going to be treated very differently. Fire is the idea of light, heat, transformation. In the body, it governs our digestion. In the mind, perception. Excess fire could be diarrhea in the body, fevers, those red burning rashes or burning skin. In the mind, excess fire, anger, irritability, sharp speech, sharp tongue, kind of harshness would be an excess of fire, an imbalance in the fire. The air element is the idea of movement or motion. So in our body, the wind is represented by the air. In our body, anything that moves is moved by air. So like the blood is not air, but the movement of the blood, it's moved by air. Colon, breath, nerve impulses, all moved by air. It's the only element that can move things. In our mind, it's the force behind our thoughts. So somebody with an excess air, racing mind that's not going to stop, has trouble slowing down. Other excess air examples would be somebody that walks fast, talks fast, does everything very quickly, has trouble sitting down, has trouble resting, has trouble sleeping, anxiety, nervousness. It's all excess air. And the last element we'll talk about is ether. Ether is a harder one to understand. It's this idea of connectedness or space. Kind of this emptiness that exists between things, and it connects everything together. So an example of ether in the body, a good example of that would be the uterus expanding to make room for a baby. Ether is so subtle, we can't see it. The only time that ether can be perceived would be in meditation on that more subtle level. But ether's got to exist. It's that space before any other element can fill it up. An example of an etheric person, or a person with a lot of ether, would be a person that's really able to see different point of views, 2 different point of views, and see it without judging. is definitely a quality of an etheric person. And the more that someone might meditate, you're going to tap into that etheric realm a little bit more. This idea of expansion, both mind and body. All right. There's a lot of other concepts to go into, but there's the basic of your elements. And the basics of your doshas we'll get into a little bit more, but vata is that air and ether, pitta, fire, a little bit of water, kapha, earth, and water. And you can join me in our next video to learn about some more practices. Thanks.